And thank you. We're going to jump right back into the questions here in our Granite State debate for the 1st Congressional District with the candidates, Councilor Russell Prescott and Congressman Chris Pappas. We're going to start with Steve Botari.
Adam, thank you. Candidates, U.S. officials have urged Israel to end the war in Gaza after the death of the leader of Hamas, saying Israel has achieved many of its goals it set out to do following October 7th. Representative Pappas, you've been a strong supporter of Israel. You voted for supplemental appropriations for weapons. But is there a point at which the toll of civilian casualties in Gaza will force you to vote no on sending more money or weapons to Israel?
Well, let's consider what's transpired over the last year. October 7th of last year, Israel was brutally attacked, the most barbaric and devastating day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And Israel has every right to be able to defend itself and pursue the terrorist threat, including Hamas and Hezbollah, which continue to attack Israel on a daily basis. It's important that we push parties to the table to try to find a path toward a ceasefire agreement. And I've called on the Biden administration to do that. We need to return the hostages that have been held for over a year in Gaza, including more than 4 Americans who are believed to still be alive today. And it is, I think, an opportunity for us to figure out how we can secure that agreement and then what the next stage for peace looks like. But we shouldn't be holding back in terms of our defensive support for Israel at this critical moment. Iran has attacked Israel twice directly, and the support that we provide for systems like Iron Dome is absolutely critical to make sure that we don't see more civilian death and more escalation in the region. I think we can abide by what we need to do for humanitarian assistance. I've supported significant support there, but we need that agreement to be able to get the assistance in and get the hostages back home.
And Councilor Prescott, you have said you believe that Israel has the sovereign right to make sure they get to the point where their enemy is neutralized forever. Depending on what Israel's definition of neutralized forever is, are you willing to financially support them indefinitely?
When we do our budgeting, we're going to make sure that you take care of the needs of our country. I also see that that means we take care of the needs of our greatest ally, Israel, at the same time. We have to do that because they're at the front lines of what would come next to the United States. Just like in 9/11, when we had people from the Middle East come in and take out our Twin Towers, Israel stood with us until we were able to eradicate that part of the problem. We brought people to justice. When we get to that point with Israel, that's when peace can start. We need to make sure that we stand with them, just as we have to stand with the United States to protect our border, to lower our cost of energy, all of these things that are on the table because they're so important to be able to secure Social Security in the future, a balanced budget, make sure that we have international peace. All of these have to be done at the same time, and we must stand with Israel.
Next question comes from Monica Hernandez.
Continuing on the topic of foreign policy, Councilor Prescott, you have said that we should not be supporting Ukraine at the expense of America and our security. At this point, is the support the U.S. is giving Ukraine making us less secure, and would you vote no on more funding to Ukraine?
I would vote no if we are not taking care of our problems within our borders at the same time. Once we start going into the process of our budget, making sure that we weigh our wants with our needs and make sure we count our needs in the United States as well as our needs internationally, we do it at the same time. I appreciate the fact that people are fighting in their backyard in Ukraine to keep their freedom. And we should stand with them as much as we can if we are protecting our freedoms here at home. If we have an open border for another 4 years with another 10 million illegal immigrants, we're going in the wrong direction. If we have energy costs going up 30%, our electric bills, kilowatt hours going up 30%, we're going in the wrong direction. We have to take care of the problems at home first. At the same time, we've got to take care of international issues, and that's how we do it. We have to do it by strict budgeting, the same thing I did in the state Senate.
Congressman Pappas, the war in Ukraine has now been going on for so long that we can actually look back at the comments you made when you were running last time around. You said the support we have provided for Ukraine to date has made a difference and will continue to, saying Ukraine is our democratic ally and we must stand with them. Congress has appropriated over $175 billion in assistance since the start of Russia's invasion in 2022. Can the U.S. financially afford to continue to stand with Ukraine the same way it did 2 years ago?
Well, we can't do it alone, and that's why we must continue to work with our allies, including an expanded NATO, to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to continue this fight. Fact is, they were brutally attacked and invaded by Putin and the Russian army, and they continue to fight for their very survival each and every day. And I know that folks around New Hampshire find common cause with what Ukraine is fighting for: freedom, independence, democracy. And I think it's important that the United States continues to be a beacon of those values to the rest of the world. And we can't do that if we're shrinking from the world stage and not stepping up to the plate with our obligation in concert with our allies to help Ukraine at this critical moment. So they're fighting hard. They're not asking for military assistance in terms of troops on the ground. They're asking for financial support and weapons systems. And most of the money that we appropriate for the Ukrainian fight gets spent right here in the United States in our own defense industrial base, helping to create jobs right here at home and ensure that we're resilient to other threats. So I think this is an important investment to degrade Russia's military, and we want to see a day where Ukraine is free and independent.
Next question from Steve Botari.
A bipartisan panel reviewing U.S. defense strategy says the threats the U.S. faces right now are the most serious since any year since 1945. It includes the potential, they note, for a near-term major war. The panel also says the U.S. is not prepared. The commissioners, equally nominated, I want to point out, by Republicans and Democrats, say the U.S. needs to increase defense spending, partly by increasing taxes, and partly, they say, by making changes to Medicare and Social Security. So, Councilor Prescott, to you first. Should the U.S. increase defense spending? And if so, what cuts or tax increases would you support to make that happen?
They do need to increase defense spending if that committee report is correct. How you do it is make sure that we have a gross domestic product is increasing. As I mentioned, we're up 2.8% right now. That means greater revenues coming into our country. When the about 4 years, for the past 4 years, we've had revenue increases of $2.5 trillion compared to the previous 4 years. We can use that money with a growing economy to be able to bolster our defense as well as balance our budget at the same time. So that can be done if we have strict budgeting processes. We're not following our 1974 Budget Act, where we go when the president is supposed to deliver a balanced budget on the first Monday or Tuesday of February, and then we go into 12 different subcommittees where we go line by line for all appropriations. We must go back to that like we do in New Hampshire.
Congressman Pappas, does the U.S. need to increase its defense spending? And if so, what are the tax increases or cuts to make that happen?
We have seen a pretty steady increase in defense spending over many, many years now. And we do need to focus on how we can respond to that report and concerns that we hear from all branches of our military about their preparedness, about their ability to recruit, about their ability to have the most modern ships and planes and equipment that we need to continue to be the most lethal fighting force in the world. We need to make sure that our military is strong. And I work on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee on the Coast Guard and their budget. That's one important aspect of our military. We've worked on making sure that we're bolstering recruitment efforts, helping to procure new ships and equipment for the Coast Guard. That's absolutely imperative for them to be able to conduct their business in the 21st century. We need to make sure that our Navy is better equipped. China is outbuilding us in terms of seafaring vessels, and we have to continue to be able to catch up and to build more ships. That's important domestically right here in New Hampshire. When you think about what we do over at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, thousands of jobs that are tied into that facility. We've expanded the dry dock space there, and so making sure that we're able to rehabilitate more subs is not just important for our national security, it's important to the economy right here in New Hampshire.
Let's shake things up with a little lightning round. These are 15-second answers, and we're going to start with you, Congressman Pappas. Are you in favor of statehood for Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think the people of Puerto Rico need to decide whether or not that's the path that they want to pursue. I have voted for statehood for Washington, D.C., but I think with respect to Puerto Rico, we need to be listening to folks on the island and helping to determine what those next steps look like.
Counselor?
No, this is not the right time.
Question to you, Counselor. What impact has inflation had on your business?
Every single thing that we sell has gone up in price. So we've raised our prices to our customers, and therefore our customers who do installations of our equipment raise prices to homeowners and to municipalities. It really comes down to, as well, is the supply chain issue, where we don't even have equipment to be able to supply to our customers. We have been inundated.
It is just
15
a 15-second, remember?
Right,
Okay.
good,
Congressman
thanks.
Pappas, how about your family business, the impact of inflation?
Seen higher prices across the board, and it's something that really hurts any business's bottom line, but requires you to have to recalibrate in terms of how you advertise pricing and meet the needs of your customers. Thankfully, business is doing well for us, but I have concerns for the small business community. We'll continue to work with them to make sure they have what they need and that they can navigate a challenging environment.
Let's do a quick yes or no. Congressman Pappas, does the Congress need to take action to rein in the power of the executive, the president? Yes or no?
Well, yes, on a number of different areas, I think we've ceded too much authority to the executive.
Counselor?
Yes, especially when the executive branch does not enforce our laws at the border.
Okay, we'll expand to larger answers now. New question for you on gun violence. Councilor Prescott, there have been more than 400 mass shootings across America this year. You're a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, and you've said that to reduce shootings, the country needs more personal responsibility and education. How do you legislate for that, since it hasn't happened over the last 20 years of school shootings?
Well, first of all, if we're going to talk about the Second Amendment, we have to make sure we remember what it says. It should not be infringed upon. So first of all, you make sure that our rights to own firearms are not infringed upon. And to have education, we have many organizations here in our state that offer education and training on firearms. We also need to make sure the needs of our country are met for our mental health system, to make sure we have as much opportunity for people to have the help they need to make sure that mental illness is not a problem with firearms. So that when you talk about training, it's done by many companies here in our state, and make sure that people, when they're trained, that they keep their firearms safe, and that's their responsibility. And when if people are safe and responsible with their firearms, there are no mass shootings.
Congressman, you voted to ban assault-style weapons and for other gun safety legislation. At this point, after years of division in Congress that has had vastly different opinions on gun control, are laws like weapons bans worth pursuing, or is there another piece of legislation you might be able to pass to reduce mass shootings?
Well, thank you for this question. I think about the young people in this country that I meet so frequently that are doing active shooter drills in their schools and ask me to take steps in Washington to help address this situation. The fact is, gun violence is the number one killer of people under the age of 18 in this country right now. And we are not powerless to address it. We do have to build on some of the initiatives that we've been able to get through Congress. Just 2 years ago, we passed the bipartisan Safer Communities Law that is beginning to make a difference in terms of banning straw purchases of weapons, having enhanced background checks for individuals under the age of 21. That's a good start. But there are other steps that we can be taking as a country to save lives and keep people safe. And we can do that consistent with the culture of responsible gun ownership that we have here in the state of New Hampshire, that I absolutely support. And so I think steps like the universal background checks law that I'm a co-sponsor of is absolutely needed to prevent dangerous weapons from falling into the wrong hands. We just observed the 1-year anniversary of the Lewiston, Maine shooting. Every day seems to be a different anniversary of a different mass shooting, or we're seeing something happen and unfold right before our very eyes in this country. It only happens in the United States of America. Let's prioritize public safety. We can do that consistent with people's rights and our culture of responsible gun ownership.
Next question now from Monica Hernandez.
Congressman Pappas, New Hampshire has one of the highest rates of student debt in the nation. You support tuition-free education at public universities and community colleges, which, if implemented, would cost the federal government billions. How would you pay for this?
Well, I think we should be taking steps to alleviate that huge burden that is on the shoulders of our families right now. And New Hampshire has the highest student debt load of any state in the country. Not coincidentally, we also provide the least amount of state support for our public university system. So we need to be doing better at all levels of government to address this issue. I think a step like tuition-free community college is a step in the right direction to make sure that young people, or people of any age really, are able to advance their education and then get into a good-paying career that's going to sustain their families and allow them to live their American dream. So I think this is really central to us here in New Hampshire. That's why I support tuition assistance programs to get people into areas of public service where they're desperately needed right now. Think about our police departments, our hospitals that are working to hire, especially in underserved and rural parts of New Hampshire, being able to help them pay down their student bills, loan bills, to make sure that they're getting out in the area and serving our communities is going to be an important step that we can take to both help address the cost of college as well as what our economy needs.
And just to follow up, how would you pay for this?
Well, I think it's a goal of how we take steps in the direction of making college more affordable. And I think we can start by expanding Pell Grants, something that is utilized by a lot of our college students, but provides a much smaller share of the overall tuition bill than it used to. And so those are the kinds of steps that I would support taking in the short run while we have that goal of making sure that debt doesn't crush students and families, that they're able to pursue a path into a good paying career.
Councilor Prescott, if you are not in favor of free tuition at public universities and institutions, what is something concrete that Congress can do to help a significant portion of the population that is facing crushing debt to try and get ahead?
First of all, you make sure you go to a college that you can afford. You decide that going in. Make sure you look at Southern New Hampshire University and work at home to get a degree. You work with the community college systems. You work at different philanthropic organizations to see if you can get scholarships. You make sure you have a good grade point average where you can get a great scholarship. Those are the things that people can do automatically. Second of all, if the federal government is going to pay down a person's debt that they accrue themselves, I don't think that's the right thing for the government to do. So I've talked to you about being able to find the education that you desire at the Southern New Hampshire University or the community college system, and all those credits automatically go right to your 4-year degree into the university system if you go to UNH or the Plymouth State University.
Next question from Steve Botari.
At this point, more than half of all U.S. states have legalized cannabis for recreational or medicinal use. And in 2022, more adults actually reported daily use of cannabis compared to alcohol. Councilor Prescott, is it time that the federal government legalize cannabis? And if not, should it at least create guidance for the states that have now legalized it?
I believe that this, again, should be a states' rights issue. Right now, we have the federal government saying one thing and states doing another. So we should end that conflict and make sure that the states have their opportunity to run their own cannabis systems if they desire.
And in terms of the federal government providing any guidance for the states?
I'm sure that if it's commerce between states, there should be guidance by the U.S. government. But if it's just internal, no.
Thank you. Congressman Pappas, you're in favor of decriminalizing marijuana, but should Congress go further and fully legalize cannabis for adults, regulating it like alcohol and tobacco?
Well, I think we should be taking steps to ensure that states can have a system of legalization that works, that adheres to public safety concerns. A number of our neighbors have done it around New Hampshire. It's a matter of probably when and not if New Hampshire moves in that direction. And so I don't believe that federal law enforcement resources should be going after states that are taking these steps. We should allow them to continue to do that. I support rescheduling marijuana. The Biden administration has taken those steps. Also support legislation for cannabis banking to make sure that our marijuana-related businesses can access traditional banking services. Right now, you have a situation where most can't because of federal rules. And so it's important that these businesses that are dealing in a lot of cash right now have the security of the banking system and are able to access it. That's a bipartisan bill that we can pass. And so I think we need smart policies at the federal level that support whatever path the states want to cut on this.
All right, we have our final question now before closing statements. 30 seconds each to answer this one. First to you, Congressman. You pointed to your bipartisan record as a reason Granite Staters should vote for you, but we want to know about the political temperature in this country and what commonly seems like American versus American. What's your biggest concern about division in the United States right now, and how can you address it?
Well, it does feel like we're so divided, and I think the rhetoric, especially toward the end of a campaign, gets incredibly hot. But what we've got to remember is that we're all on the same team here. And the fact is, there are great people on both sides of the aisle that are patriotic Americans that believe in the future of this country. And we've got a lot of people that are watching America at this moment, including the autocrats of the world like Putin and Xi, that believe America's best days are behind us, that democracy is not up to the task. And we've got to prove them wrong. And so I hope we all wake up on the morning of November 6th and figure out ways to come together and solve problems. That's the track record I've had in Washington as the third most bipartisan member of the entire House of Representatives. I partner with Republicans on 80% of the legislation.
Congressman.
That's the kind of work that can break the gridlock.
And 30 seconds to you, Counselor.
Well, I learned 20 years ago that negative campaigning just ends up being a negative campaign, and one person who does the best negative campaigning usually wins. That's really not the way that I wanted to run my elections since then, and I've strived very, very hard to make sure that we talk about the issues. And I think that you lose credibility when you attack persons that it's untruthful attacks. And I have to say that I was disappointed in Chris Pappas, and earlier on he was doing some untruthful advertising about my record. So I appreciate that he did take those things down. So the last thing I would say,
Counselor, that we've hit time. We've got to go to final
Gotta respond
statements.
to that.
And unfortunately, we're out of time for the evening. Each candidate now has 60 seconds for a closing statement. We begin with Counselor Prescott.
thank you very much for having this here at WMUR. I wanted to let you know that being a person of integrity is probably the most important thing for anyone. Their word is their bond. I've been married for 42 years, and it takes a lot of effort to make sure that I'm the best husband I can be. Have 5 children. Trying to be the best father I can be is the same thing. And 8 grandkids. Been in 40 years in business and making sure I take care of my employees with health insurance, 100% of health insurance. I've been trusted for 10 years in the state Senate to bring those same work ethics and balancing of budgets to the state Senate. And also for 4 years as your executive counselor. You were trusting me for those 14 years. I'm asking you to look into my record, into my behavior, into who I am as a person. And I'm asking you for your trust again to work for you to make sure we solve our border problems, our economy, and make sure that we have energy independence. Thank you.
Okay, and now 60 seconds for a closing statement from Congressman Pappas.
Well, thank you to WMUR for hosting this. To everyone who tuned in, and Russell, it's always great to be with you. I respect Russell Prescott, but I think respectfully, we didn't hear a lot of answers from him to the questions tonight about critical issues like housing and childcare and the pressures that are on working families today. He mentioned the deficit a few times, but he didn't talk about programs that he would cut. And in fact, he supports more tax cuts for the biggest corporations and wealthiest Americans that would add trillions of dollars to the deficit over the next 10 years. So there's a better way. I'm working across the aisle. I'm known as a pragmatic leader in Washington, and I want to focus on how we can cut taxes for working families, support the needs of our small businesses, stand up for our veterans and our military families, and address the situation at the border by passing that bipartisan legislation. There's also a stark difference between the two of us on a woman's right to choose. I don't believe that politicians should be making this decision, and I will work to restore Roe versus Wade as the law of the land. I take my cues directly from the people of New Hampshire. I work for you, and I would be truly honored to earn your support to serve for the next 2 years. So I look forward to seeing you out there. I hope everyone votes on November 5th.
If you missed any part of tonight's debate or want to know more about the candidates, go to the Commitment 2024 section of WMUR.com and our mobile app. You'll also find our special election coverage streaming on Very Local. Thank you to the candidates tonight, and please do join us back here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock with the candidates for the 2nd Congressional District. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.